what we're really seeing over and over is founder-led marketing via content creation. And it's really important now where your patients right now, they're listening to podcasts, they're discovering you on social media, and they really want to hear the founder. They want to hear you, the doctor. They don't want to hear from your marketing team or someone else. They really want to hear directly from you. More patients, more authority, more freedom. I'm Brett Gregory, founder of Dr. Talks, where we're democratizing the creator economy for doctors. Welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, James Maskell, and today we are here with Brett Gregory. He is the founder of Dr. Talks. Brett, welcome to the podcast.
James, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and an honor working with you, and I'm happy to be here and excited to have our conversation.
Yeah, before we kick off, I just wanted to let everyone know, that Brett and his team, run my podcast. And, I've had different teams over the years to organize it. But Brett, it's been great to work with you and your team, and it makes it super easy to do all the logistical back end stuff. So I'm really grateful and for all the support that you provided.
Thanks so much. It's really fun to have you on the network and to plug you in. We've got 3,000 doctors on our network now, and I love that you're such a champion of doctors. So that's near and dear to my heart.
Well, look, I want to, one of the themes of the evolution of medicine has always been optimal practice models. And there's a couple of things that have come up in the last little while that I want to ask you about with regard to getting the word out. But before we get into the specifics around podcasting, what is the vision for Dr. Talks? What's the mission, and how do you help doctors in that mission?
Sure. So the mission for Dr. Talks is two-sided, one for the patient, one for the doctor. So we're on a mission to help 1 billion people suffering from chronic illness and disease get the information they need directly from the source, which is you, the doctor who's listening to this. And then the flip side to that same coin is we are democratizing the creator economy for doctors. I feel like doctors have been squeezed from so many different angles so unfairly, and it's time for doctors to get paid with your knowledge. So I've created a platform that helps amplify your voice, get you seen and heard and compensated for your information. So I'm all about helping doctors because I believe you're the ones that are really going to help us all heal.
Amazing. Well, look, I want to chat a little bit about, podcasting, and that's the sort of the main way in which the doctors get the word out. I'm sure that as soon as I say, hey, look, the idea here is that I want you to think about starting a podcast, they've probably heard it before. They've probably groaned. It probably is in some ways very aspirational because it's fun to have a podcast and it's fun to do that. But they may have tried it and done a couple of episodes, or they may have found the whole process overwhelming. Why do you think that this is a critical piece of sort of the infrastructure for someone who wants to have an impact in that way?
Well, podcasts are by far the fastest growing segment of any media. And I mean by an enormous margin. Right now, there's 850 million monthly active listeners for Spotify and Apple. And YouTube for podcasts is significantly larger than that. So all of your patients, clients, and customers listen to podcasts. Pretty much all of them do right now today. If you're not being a guest or a host, you're really missing out on a huge channel that in a lot of ways can be extremely low cost or even free. And, I'm a big fan of crawl, walk, run. So if somebody feels like starting their own podcast is really overwhelming, no worries. Start as a guest. And I've spent a lot of time creating a really easy system where doctors can be a guest for free on podcasts. We've created a way where they can create their own channel on Dr. Talks for free. It takes 2 minutes. It's just like creating a YouTube channel, but you get connected in a network of 3,000 other doctors that all have channels, and many of them have their own podcasts, and you can easily become a guest on those podcasts. One thing when I tell doctors that is okay, start out as a guest. Very commonly hear this response, why would anyone want to hear me? And isn't this information that I have to share, hasn't it been said already over and over? And I want to just take one quick step back and let people know why I'm on this mission in the first place. From 1996 to 2006, I had my own employee benefits business and we did corporate wellness programs. And I had a talk radio show where I would interview CEOs of companies. And I ended up building a really significant business just from the radio show, which certainly helps me with these podcasts today. And sadly, in 2006, my 32-year-old brother was diagnosed with stage 4 non small cell carcinoma. He was given 9 months to live. He passed away peacefully in my father's arms almost 9 months later. My dad's a doctor, and my mom is a nurse, and she was a palliative care specialist. And so I got to see firsthand with my brother having literally the best care that anyone could possibly have. Father's a doctor, mother's a palliative care specialist. He was living with them for the last 9 months of his life. He literally had the best care in the world. And it made me realize what a privilege it is to be related to a doctor, to have a doctor in the family. And while I can't give everybody their own family member who's a doctor, the next best thing is I can give people that information from a doctor on demand at scale anytime they need it. So that's why I created Doctor Talks, and I wanted to make it as easy as possible for doctors to get booked on podcasts. And from my perspective, I would respond to the doctor who says, "Why would anybody want to listen to me?" I would say, "Why wouldn't they?" When you go to a cocktail party and you tell people a doctor, they start asking you healthcare questions and medical questions. That happens a lot. So
Yeah.
that should prove all you need to know about how people want to hear from you. They want that information from you. So I have found that it's incredibly easy for doctors to get booked on podcasts for free. We have a whole system and a process for that. Actually, I'd love to share if I could. Probably many of you are using your favorite AI product, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT. What I always recommend for doctors is to create what I like to call your signature talk. And so this is the prompt. Go to your favorite AI platform and type in, help me come up with a catchy podcast interview title on, and then you fill in the blank. Whatever your area of expertise is, if it's Alzheimer's, brain health, hormones, peptides, whatever it is, fill in the blank. So help me come up with a catchy podcast interview title on, and fill in the blank. And it'll come up with some amazing catchy podcast interview titles. Find the one that resonates with you. And then we've made it really easy for you to send that as your pitch with one click to hundreds of doctors that host podcasts on Doctor Talks. And let me tell you, most doctors that host their own podcasts are trying to do approximately one interview a week. They need 52 interviews a year. They're always looking for new people to interview. And on Doctor Talks, it's usually doctors interviewing other doctors. So it's great because you can get interviewed by your peers. You're going to have a great conversation that, trust me, millions and tens of millions of people want to listen to.
Yeah. Super cool. Well, look, I've been thinking a little bit about. I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a pharmacist from Ohio, who has been one of the first people to use FullScript journeys. And FullScript is a mission partner for us on the evolution of medicine. And on Journey, she said, she'd start to build these journeys, which is essentially like having the equivalent of a Function Health, on the front of your practice, where you can sell labs to patients directly, and then, that without starting a new patient engagement with them. And, and so she had, she's now selling 20 of those a month outside of just the normal pharmacy business.
Wow.
And she said that she had started a podcast, and
Nice.
that she has her own journey as the only sponsor on that podcast. And it really got me thinking about, because I've thought, like you said, there are, when I started the Evolution of Medicine podcast, I think there was zero podcasts for doctors in functional medicine because it's such a small niche. But, there's lots of other people who are doing that now. But I had this idea and I wanted to run it by you because you know the podcast business, and in this world, better than almost anyone. I had an idea where it's like, if I had a local clinic and I really wanted to thrive and I wanted to grow my practice, and I was really focused on my local area rather than like telemedicine, what about starting a podcast that is all about health, but in my county or in my
Mm.
town? Because it
Yep.
just feels like, if I'm in the business of health and I'm in some town, I've never been asked to be on a podcast. So if I'm a local
Hmm.
chiropractor or a local gym owner or a local, therapist or whatever, I've probably been dreaming of being asked to be on a podcast, but like no one's ever asked me. And if I show up and I say, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And then, hey, would you send this to all of your patients so that they can hear you say? They
Yep.
probably would. And then
Yep.
that's going to put you in a position as a person of authority who has the podcast called, Healthy Eldorado or whatever,
Hmm.
is a great way of establishing that. And I think I just wanted to share that because I just feel like, that in my mind is actually a pretty exciting proposition for people who want to focus on building a local practice.
Not only do I love that, I recommend it constantly because that is actually the fastest way to monetize your podcast. A lot of times when doctors start their own podcast, they're thinking, okay, I want to be like Andrew Huberman or something. And I tell people, well, there's a way to try and grow listeners and followers, but that's almost never the fastest way to make money off of your podcast. If you're trying to actually monetize your podcast, if you want to use your podcast to get real patients in the door, what you just described is the fastest way to do it. Local podcasting. And it's really specifically, you want to interview real referral sources. Now, depending on what you do, that could be everything from other local physicians. It could be a local chiropractor. It could be a local nutritionist. It could be your local gym, the local yoga studio. It could also be local patients that love you and, would be happy to be on and talk about their real patient success story. The Love the Local podcast as the fastest way to monetize interviewing real referral sources. So one of the things we did with Doctor Talks with our 3,000 practitioners that are already on the platform, we now have an AI matching tool that matches guests to hosts. And one of the things that you can do is source locally. Sometimes people want to do interviews only in their state because of their licensing requirements. Sometimes people want to do interviews only in their zip code to find people who can walk in the door. I'm a huge fan of that. It's something that is extremely practical, and you can make a terrific podcast out of interviewing local referral sources. So it's one of my favorite ways to, and it is the fastest way to monetize your podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, I could really see that working. I put together an event last year called Healthy Eldorado. And through that, I met like the local farmers, all the
Yep.
practitioners by putting on the event. But I could see that a podcast would stand the test of time and, would be there it's really about, building a media brand around your business,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And here's kind of the pro move for that. So one of the things that I always recommend to doctors is, especially when you first start out your podcast, all podcasts start with 0 subscribers. You have 0 5-star reviews. What I always recommend is have the guests ask the guest to give you a review after your podcast is done. And the way that I like to do that is to use the phrase, please don't keep me a secret. So after your podcast is complete, send an email to your guest, say, hey, thank you so much. That was so great. I really appreciate it. Please don't keep us a secret. Would you mind leaving me a quick little review on Apple? Now, if they're local, you would just simply ask them to also take that same review that they wrote, and they can maybe modify it a little bit, but post it on your Google business. And so reviews on your local Google business help you tremendously with SEO, search engine optimization. So you can have this dual effect where you get this real referral source who is happy to give you actual referrals, and you get the review for your podcast and the review for your Google. So that's kind of the pro move when people are ready to do that.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a compelling starting point for practitioners. So just, I guess, the objection might be that sounds like an overwhelming amount of time. Can you
sure.
share how like your system allows people to minimize the amount of time and maximize the output?
Yeah, so I think it's the most important thing. So again, if you're going to be a guest, your time commitment is not that much. I generally recommend people shoot for approximately 25-minute interviews. That's just a rule of thumb. That doesn't mean if you have to go just that length. But if you're going to be a guest, it should take about 30 minutes, an hour if you're going to have a long podcast. And however many times per week you can be a guest on someone else's show, that's the extent of your time commitment. If you're going to be a host, all you have to do is make it work for you. So I have some hosts that only on Thursdays, when they don't see patients, once every Thursday afternoon, they do one interview, and they do that very consistently, and it works great for them, 1 hour a week. I have other doctors that have much more chaotic and busier schedules where they'll do a block recording once a month. They'll do 4+ shows once a month. I have others that are even more extreme where they'll do 2 weeks a year. They'll just knock out 25 interviews. I have other hosts who once or twice a year, they'll knock out all their interviews at a live event. That's something that you're about to do.
Yeah.
And we do that all the time. So when we go to live events now, we always have our camera crews with us. We're always recording podcasts. I'm going to do an event in September where we're actually going to record 3 podcasts simultaneously. And I think we're going to do 86 interviews. So you just have to make it work for you. Whatever is going to work for your schedule is what will allow you to sustain it. And so the thing about podcasts, the doctors that we have that have had a tremendous amount of success, we have Dr. David Jockers, who's got the largest functional nutrition podcast out there, and Dr. Joel Kahn, who's got the largest vegan cardiology podcast out there. The thing that they have in common is longevity and consistency. They've been doing it for 6 and 7 years, respectively. And the only way that you're able to do that is if you're able to make it work for your schedule. And I'll share one last side effect that most people don't expect when they're starting a podcast, whether it's just a guest or a host, is it's way more fun than they expected it to be. And that's something that I always experience. The last thing that I'll say is having your own podcast, I call it super networking. It's a license where if you're at a conference and maybe there's some very famous person speaking on stage, somebody that you've always wanted to get to know and idolized or wanted to just get a chance to shake their hand, having a podcast is kind of like a license to walk up to that person, introduce yourself, say hello, and actually ask them if they want to be on your podcast. And I think I have about a 99.9% success rate of our doctors who have done exactly that, getting people booked on podcasts. And it's been really, really amazing.
Right. You've just described, my life story, because that's literally how the Functional Forum happened. And then, with the Evolution of Medicine podcast, I had a good run in that. We were the only one going. If you wanted to get the word out to other doctors about functional medicine or about your methodology or something you were doing in practice, it was a great place to do it. And I
Yeah.
totally agree. That's been my experience as well.
Yeah. Amazing. So
Yeah. So, what's the, what would you, what's the best way to start the process if you're interested in finding out more?
Absolutely. So go to drtalks.com/connect. We'll put the links in the chat. And there you can create your own channel for free. There's an onboarding process that'll walk you through. It takes about 2 minutes. And if you have a YouTube channel, one thing I found is like 95% of the doctors who come on have a YouTube channel. You may have some content from that YouTube channel. We've made it where you can automatically import that content, which gives you like a really robust, good looking channel right out of the gates from moment one. Our AI automation system will match you as a guest with hosts, or if you're a host with guests. And it's a great way. I want to encourage you to then reach out to other doctors who are on the platform. You can reach out to interview them on your channel, or you can reach out to be a guest. So remember what I told you earlier is to create your signature talk, send them an email and say, Dr. So-and-so, I love your show. Here is my signature talk. I would love to be a guest on your podcast. And many times you might get a response faster than you think. Now, don't just send one and stop. I want you to send multiple, but look for a lot of the doctors that you're matched with on AI and send that to several of them. Go ahead and send it to 20 or 30 or 40. There's plenty of doctors that are looking for you right now on Doctor Talks, and we'd love to have you. So fill that out and we'll see you on the inside.
Yeah, I love that. Well, just what you were referring to earlier, this podcast is coming out around the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual conference. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be recording podcasts. I got a live podcast set up there. So I'm going to be, knocking out a lot of those. So if you are around, love to see you. Come on by and we'll capture there with you. Brett, I know, I'd love to get your take on this because I think you've sort of really worked out one very interesting corner of this world, which is the distribution of this information. And I guess I'd just love to get your take on what you think is coming next, because ultimately a big differentiator 10 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even still today to a certain degree. And I'm still actually baffled that more and more clinicians and more doctors, aren't aware of what's happening in the functional medicine space or sort of like the broader longevity and health creation space. But like, what do you think is coming next? And how can practitioners prepare for being relevant, being found, being successful in this next era?
What we're really seeing over and over is founder-led marketing via content creation. And it's really important now where your patients right now, they're listening to podcasts, they're discovering you on social media, and they really want to hear the founder. They want to hear you, the doctor. They don't want to hear from your marketing team or someone else. They really want to hear directly from you. And what I love about podcasts is it's the easiest way to create that content, but also being interviewed or being a host is the way to create the long form content. The short form content is great to get found, and that's what you would see on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube Shorts. That's the great way to get discovered. But if you want to build trust enough so that you can convert a browser into an actual paying patient, they really love that long form content. And that's what the interviews do so well and so easily. And if you're not out there creating the content, I think a lot of people are going to have a harder time getting discovered. So again, we've tried to make it as easy as we possibly can so that the easiest way to create that content is for you to get interviewed. And I've tried to make that as easy as possible by being a guest on podcasts with our network and system at Dr. Talks.
Love that. Well, Brett, I really want to just share my appreciation for all the, support. It's really good to work with you. Doing those summits has been, really wonderful to lay out a framework to understand this new understanding of Alzheimer's, to connect with practitioners who are doing on the front lines. And, I do think that if you are serious about building longevity into your practice, and I mean like being around for a while, not going out of business, not having to be an employee to go out and do that, building this media channel is really powerful. And I think that what we talked about today with regards to the local opportunity, is huge. And I'd love to see more and more doctors stepping out to lead those conversations, because really the doctors that we know are a good source of being a quarterback for that information, because they can help sort of separate the wheat from the chaff, find the best vendors, put it into the context that, people should understand. And I think that that's a translation element that can be really powerful.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love helping doctors get discovered and growing, getting new patients and helping more people and getting paid fairly in the process.
Awesome. Well, look, I would love to I'd love to hear from you. Set up your own, set up your own system on Doctor Talks, your own page, and ping me one of the doctors here. And particularly, I'm one of the users, and particularly if you have something that you think is interesting for health professionals and doctors, that would be great. This is the Evolution of Medicine podcast. I'm your host, James Maskell, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much. If you found this episode valuable, please consider hitting the like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps others find the show. And if you're ready to get known, get booked, and get more patients now, visit drtalks.com/connect to sign up for free and start getting booked on podcasts today. We'll see you next time.